While warmer weather is a positive sign of spring, the emergence of potholes is another less welcome indicator we're leaving winter behind us. And you'll want to avoid those potholes at least until April 30th, because until then, the state isn't liable for any damage caused to your vehicle from road defects like potholes. But Assemblymember Patrick Carroll, a Rockland County Democrat, is hoping to change the state's seasonal window, and he joins us in the Capitol Press Room studio to discuss his bill on the issue. Thanks for visiting us in the studio, Assemblymember.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. So, for starters, can you walk us through the state's liability exemption as it pertains to state roads right now between late November and the end of April? For example, how broad is this, and does it extend to local roads and local municipalities as well?
It's my understanding that it's just state roads, but yes, from November 16th through April 30th, which is a very large window of time considering right now it's the beginning of April, people are out and about. The state doesn't have any liability to pay claims that arise out of damage that occurs on state roadways. And this is something we looked into because we have so many people calling our office saying, I've flattened 2 tires, I broke a rim, whatever it may be, on a state roadway. What can you do? And we're like, not too much, it seems.
And my understanding is that a government that maintains a road is only liable when maybe there's some sort of prior notification that there was an issue with the road. I mean, is that your understanding of how this works as well?
I think general tort principles, I think they have to have a notice in a reasonable amount of time to cure a defect generally. But then with that carve out of the window of time, they could even have that notice for eons. And then if it's between those 2 dates, they could say, no, sorry, no dice.
And your bill, is it as simple as removing the exemption, or are you looking to do anything more detailed than that?
We're making this more of a notice and an awareness of defect and liability state. There's a couple states that already have something similar, and you would think that, okay, maybe it's a warm state issue that doesn't have to deal with the ice and snow that we have. But no, Michigan and Maine are 2 states that have this right now. Essentially, if the state has notice of the issue and a reasonable amount of time to cure the defect, there's liability that incurs if something happens after that reasonable amount of time. So right now, the reasonable amount of time we put in the bill is 15 days. So if the state knows that there's a real horrible pothole on Route 59 in the middle of Clarkstown, they have 15 days to cure the problem, and they haven't done anything, then someone can collect damages related to that pothole.
So 15 days is a pretty concrete window. Why that approach as opposed to something with more flexibility to recognize that, hey, maybe it gets noticed, but then it snows, or the temperatures are too cold to accommodate this type of road work? Why not add that flexibility?
I mean, I guess we could be amenable to any amendments, but I think we need accountability for the state DOT. A lot of the issues we get from constituents, like we've called them, they haven't done anything. We need people out there fixing the potholes. It's a huge problem. Understandingly, we know that it's cold patch to a certain time of the year. They can't actually fill it permanently.
Sure.
But they need to be out there because it's a hazard. There's roadways in my town that car after car after car are getting flat tires, and there's nothing we can do. They call our office, and this is at the very least something we can try to, in the future, have some recourse to the constituents.
If your bill did become law, what do you envision the outcome would be? Is it primarily we're going to have a lot of lawsuits against the state, or do you think it would demonstrably change the state's approach to filling potholes November 16th through April 30th?
Of course, as a lawmaker who wants his bill passed, and actually we do have a Senate sponsor with Senator Skoufis on the bill, I want the state to change their actions. I want them to get a call from a David Lombardo saying there's a pothole on the thruway. They have a truck out there immediately fixing it. I hope that's the result, but I think it's going to be a mix of both. There's going to be people collecting damages when they're not fixed, and maybe some quicker action by the state DOT.
The bill memorandum that accompanies this legislation under the fiscal implications has the classic TBD, to be determined. Do you have an estimate, though, about what it would take to comply with this bill if it became law, either from lawsuits or from this more proactive pothole repair system?
I mean, I think that there's definitely going to be some sort of fiscal impact, but the question
is,
state taxpayers are paying taxes, and the state should be paying them back when they have damages. So either way, it's coming out of the constituents' pockets. So if there's an impact, it's like, okay, well, fix the problem you made. And hopefully at the end of the day, these problems are less bad, I would say. You can't prohibit potholes. You can't fix all potholes and make it so they never happen. But at the very least, there'll be more accountability. People are calling our office day in and day out about potholes and utility bills. And those are 2 huge problems. At the very least, if we can fill the potholes, then we can focus our attention to, a greater need of utility bill issues.
Well, and you point out that people are already paying for car damage, but I have to imagine that proactive work on the potholes is ultimately going to be cheaper than whatever it's going to cost to repair a car and maybe the subsequent insurance costs as well.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a road engineer. I don't have the overview.
Do you play one on the radio?
I can try. I think I'm getting better as this interview. If we go a couple hours, I'll tell you my theories on how to pave roads.
Sure.
No, but I would imagine that you can have a system through which there's inspections done around the regions of the DOT, so that people can be aware and know the problem areas. And yes, if we had better infrastructure, for example, Route 304, which is a major throughway through my district, I think you probably are familiar with it, or Route 303, they're going to be repaved in the coming year. So hopefully that better structure and better pavement rather than a piecemeal, literally, will lend itself to less potholes. But I think that we need better roadways, we need better inspection, and ultimately, hopefully, we have better results.
Well, this predates you joining the Assembly, but when the Governor Hochul, took the reins of the state, one of her big efforts was to eliminate or address potholes. I think we had Operation Potholes. There was the soundbite of her saying from potholes to not holes or something like that. What do you think of the level of investment the state is making right now in the status quo when it comes to addressing potholes?
I mean, obviously, it could be better. People are very frustrated right now. Again, back to the affordability issues. People are paying enough money to live in the state of New York, and they drive down the street after going to the grocery store and paying a huge amount of money for groceries or whatever it may be, and they hit a pothole, and all of a sudden it's $500-$600 for their new tire. I think we need to do better. I think we owe it. I mean, winter is no secret. It's going to happen every year. We need to have a plan to deal with these potholes. I wish I could have a canned, potholes, not holes, or I told you no pot shots during this interview about potholes, but it needs to be better. And hopefully this legislation will be one step towards fixing it.
Well, right now, if someone wants to report a pothole, they can call 1-800-POTHOLE, and that way there's an accounting. And there are some municipalities that even have maps of the status of potholes when they're detected to when they're addressed. When you think about that idea of notification, do you think that we need to update this at all? Do we need to have the state and local governments more aggressive in terms of letting people know that there is a responsibility for them to report potholes? Should it become easier to report potholes? What do you think about that idea of just letting the local governments all the way up to the state know about this issue?
I think that, they should know about it already. I think the question is, should it be a reactive type process where someone has a pothole, they report it, and all of a sudden get fixed? Yes, that in once in a while, that's acceptable. I mean, a pothole can develop in a day, and maybe the state doesn't know about it. But in an ideal world, the state should know about the problem areas and be fixing them on their own accord. It shouldn't be a reactive process. It should be proactive.
Oh, that's interesting. You feel like there's reason for the state to know about them or to be proactively policing them?
I think so. I think they should have people driving around the state roadways on a weekly, or at the very least every other weekly basis. They should know where the areas are. They should know where the areas of the deterioration of the roadways are that are problem areas, and have people go out and look at them. I mean, people shouldn't be losing tires and risking their lives and injury because the state isn't taking care of the roadways.
So I could envision a world in which your bill is unanimously approved through the Assembly and Senate, and when it gets to the governor's desk, that she vetoes it, saying there's a fiscal impact to this. It's best done in the context of the budget. What do you think of that argument? And are you taking the long game approach to this, where you're thinking, hey, let's build some momentum, let's get the governor on record, and maybe this is a conversation for the 2027 budget? I
mean, ideally we get it done before the winter of next year, so it's not a problem. But it is sort of we didn't realize that we had this window of time that there's no action or liability on the part of the state until we started looking at it for people who have this problem with and damage to their car. We said, wait a second, this is not right. We need the state to be paying people out for the damages that they are incurring because of the potholes. So yes, if it didn't get done this session, maybe next year's budget would be a possibility. I don't want my pothole bill to continue to delay the state budget for this year.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Patrick Carroll. He is a Rockland County Democrat. Assemblymember, thanks for visiting us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.